You are tuned in to the Faithful Fanatic Podcast, part of the Pigskin Podcast Network, sponsored by DraftKings. And DraftKings has some very exciting stuff going on, starting with their new Rainmakers Fantasy Football, the next generation of fantasy football. With Rainmakers Football, the first ever NFT fantasy football game from DraftKings, and the only NFT fantasy game sponsored and approved and licensed by the NFLPA. You can win millions in prizes by building the ultimate NFT franchise. Right now, everyone can get their first full roster starter pack for free. Playing Rainmakers is simple. You just buy, sell, bid, and win player card NFTs of the biggest names in the game through regular drops and auctions on DraftKings Marketplace. Craft lineups of athletes from your NFT collection and earn points for touchdowns, receptions, and more, just like daily fantasy football. The next generation of fantasy sports is here. Download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app now. Sign up with promo code TPPN. Click the Rainmakers tile and opt in to get your first card free. Plus, play for millions in prizes all football season long while building the ultimate NFT fantasy franchise with Rainmakers Football. That's promo code TPPN. Build, play, win. Only at DraftKings. It's been a long time. It's been a long time since I've recorded an episode. We have a very, 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 very exciting show today. And I have a very special guest. Kevin McKelligan, the Twitter Spaces King himself, is joining me. Kevin, my man, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome, man. I'm here to bring the energy. We're going to talk some 49ers football, and I hope we can provide a good show for you guys.
Absolutely. So, Kevin, you and I were catching up before the show started, and I found your story of becoming a 49er football fan really compelling. Mm-hmm. You want to go through that real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So Nick and I actually, we have a pretty similar story. My grandfather used to take my dad to games downtown San Francisco at Kezar Stadium. So that's kind of where our roots started in 49er fandom. And my dad carried that obviously to Candlestick. He's rooted for the team his entire life. I grew up watching old videos that my grandfather would record on VCR from the 80s, late 80s and early 90s. So I spent my childhood from the time I was 3, 4, 5 years old until 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, watching old games that he would record on the VCR. So, we'd go out and play golf, and at night we'd watch 49ers games, and then on Sunday we'd watch the current team. So that's kind of how I grew up as a fan, and it's just never really stopped, honestly.
Yeah, same experience, very same experience. My grandpa on my mom's side, season ticket holder at Kezar since 1946, went to all the games. I'm a 49er fan through my family. It's in the blood. So we definitely relate on that level. And I'm excited, Kevin, to have you on tonight because the regular season's here. Just about. We're 2 weeks, 3 weeks away. We have 2 more preseason games to get through. And, you and I had a lot of agreements this offseason as to whether or not the 49ers were doing enough to help take their roster over the top. So our first topic of the night, plain simple, did the 49ers do enough this offseason to make themselves legitimate championship favorites? And I'll let you go ahead and start with that.
That's a great question. And honestly, I really believe in this roster and starting to kind of break down and really think about it, how deep the roster is. We'll go into a little bit later, the teams that could compete with us for the Super Bowl. Now, thinking back in free agency, there's a lot of discussion about what could we do with the current cap situation because we didn't have a lot of cap to spend initially, right? We had a good signing in Charvarius Ward, who's going to be our CB1, fantastic lockdown press man corner. And I think that's something that with the philosophy of D'Amico Ryans kind of switching up the defense, we're still going to be running a 4-3 base, but we're going to be running more press man. So having those players that have that personnel is definitely going to be important to stopping opposing offenses. We had a couple great special team signings. Looks like Ray McLeod has been doing really well in camp. He had a big touchdown in the first preseason game, broke CB's ankles. So he's showing a lot of promise. And then Oren Burks was a good signing. He's more of a depth linebacker piece. And then obviously George Odom, who we thought maybe could start at strong safety, but it looks like Talanoa Hufanga, our draft pick from last year, is stepping up and doing the job. So pretty good signings. Honestly, with the amount of cap room that we did have, we did pretty well. Obviously, there's a cap room that we could have cleared up. We do still have Jimmy Garoppolo still on the roster,
If you can
which is
believe
really
that.
interesting because if you look at the cap situation now, we could have used the cap last year to essentially, the cap and free agency to get players to make the team better this year. And obviously, we're looking at the 2022 season, right? So there are a few players that I would have loved to have, like Hassan Riddick signed for $15 million in Philadelphia. I believe Chandler Jones signed for $17 million in Oakland. Just a valuable depth piece on the opposite side of both to make to our defense lethal, and then possibly even signing a guy like Tyrann Mathieu, who ended up going back to New Orleans. So those are a few players that I would have loved to see, but the organization did have a different direction. So I'm going to just trust what they have put together. Drake Jackson looks like he's going to be a stud. Kamoka Toure was another good signing. He's on a 1-year deal. He's going to be really good for a rotation piece. He's very violent, great with his hands. So did they do enough? I think they did enough to compete for a Super Bowl, but they didn't quite do what I expected to maybe get them over the top. But here's the thing. So they could have cut him during free agency and spent that money, or they could cut him closer to the season. They're going to be able to free up $25 million this year. But as the cap goes and cap rules, they actually roll over till next year. So it's really $50 million they're going to be adding. So if they want to compete this year, they could potentially win the Super Bowl and free up close to $50 million in cap room to make the team better next year, because there are a few players that we may not be able to resign.
Definitely. And I think you nailed it. There were a lot of key acquisitions for Various Ward, George Odom, Burks. There's a lot of guys there that fill needs. Special teams was awful last year. You just think of the fake punt by Travis Homer that went 70+ yards for a touchdown.
Totally unexpected.
Totally unexpected. They were not good on kickoffs. Their kickoff coverage wasn't good. It was just a very down year special teams wise. So those signings were essential, right? And I think where you and I agree is there wasn't that big splashy move that you could make when you have $25 million potentially to free up. And remember, Garoppolo was hurt. That money was only going to be about 17 or 18 million. But when you're in a position like you're in, when you were just one of the final 4 NFL teams in the 2021 season, and you can sign a top tier football player on your football team in the offseason, you have to do it. And that was what was most maddening for me. Do the 49ers legitimately have a Super Bowl roster? Yes. But I think they could have went above and beyond by cutting Garoppolo. Like, really, this is what makes me so mad about the situation. I know you agree with this, right? That
I do. You
sat on your hands for what, 6-7 months now, just to potentially trade him for a 7th round pick. That's what you're hoping for. Fourth. It's going to be a day 3 pick. It's going to be a day
definitely.
So I don't think there's any situation where holding off for a day 3 pick is going to do more for this football team than what you could have done in April. Cut Garoppolo for $18 million, what it would have been. And Jimmy Ward's hurt right now. He might not play week 1. Talanoa Hufanga, he's a question mark. George Odom is a question mark, Like these guys, Odom started a little bit with the Colts, but do you really want that being one of your starting safeties? Tyrann Mathieu, hey, he's an all-pro safety. Is he a little past his prime? Yes, but he would have helped out. You look at the offensive line. Where's someone like Will Hernandez? Will Hernandez would have been a great addition just to beef up the offensive line a little bit. So, yes, the 49ers have a championship roster, but they could have helped out Trey Lance a little bit more on both sides of the ball by really just getting that marquee player to make this championship push, something that the Los Angeles Rams would have done.
Right, exactly. And we did lose some key pieces. I mean, we lost Laken Tomlinson to the Jets. He signed for $16 million a year. That was a big price tag. I don't know if they'd be willing to pay that much for a guard, but that's a solid piece. I believe he's literally missed 1 snap in the 5 or 6 years he's been here. So that's
Iron Man.
Iron Man, exactly. He's a solid piece that we lost. Now, they're really high on Aaron Banks, right? So they drafted him last year in the 2nd round. But we're talking about free agency. So what I would have loved to see is if they did cut Garoppolo, I would have probably gone for my free agent crush was Hassan Riddick. And I know that he went back to his roots, where his hometown, Philadelphia. He signed with the Eagles for $15 million a season. But that would have been a piece. He's a veteran player. He's still young, though. He's a young veteran. And he's had 3 consecutive seasons of over 10 sacks. So basically what the 49ers were probably thinking is that, okay, we can offer these guys. I know they were in on Chandler Jones. They were in on guys like J.C. Jackson, right? The reason why J.C. Jackson didn't sign with us because he wanted $28 million in his first year. And we just couldn't do that. We just didn't have enough room. So we were in on these guys, but we just didn't have the cap room to do it. I would have loved Hassan Riddick on the opposite side of Bosa because he's also violent, very fast on the edge, and he would have created problems on the other side, right? We see Nick Bosa lining up a lot of the times on the left side of the line going against the right tackle. So I would have loved to have somebody who's formidable to challenge the left tackle. Now they've chosen to go with depth, and if they can get, roughly 8.5 to 12.5 to maybe even 14 sacks on the opposite side of Bosa in a rotation, I think they'll see that that's also valuable. And in total, they're spending less money on that side. So they chose to go with depth, but I agree. I would have loved to have a guy like Chandler Jones, who's capable of going for 4 sacks in a game on the opposite side of Bosa, just for the threat. Because if you have two guys that are tacticians and can rush the passer like that, what is the opposing quarterback going to do? They can't do anything.
Nothing. Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's just coulda, shoulda, woulda. We're in the position that we're in right now. We're starting to gain a sense of what this football team is going to look like. We're just about finished with training camp. We have 1 week of preseason. We've seen the Packers game. No starters really played besides from Trey Lance and a couple others on the defensive side of the ball. And the guys that we're going to really find out about, the Aaron Bankses of the world, the Jake Brendells, and oh man, I'm so nervous about that because when you're a championship contending team, you want to have as few question marks on your roster as possible. But then again, every single contender has their fair share of question marks, So I'm looking right now, I'm on VegasInsider.com. They have the 49ers as, what is this, the 6th best Super Bowl odds, 7th best? Oh man, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They have the 7th best Super Bowl odds right now with the Bills, Buccaneers, Chiefs, Packers, Rams, Chargers in front of them. Do you think that's fair?
I think that's pretty fair. I actually think we're better than the Chiefs. I think just because they have Patrick Mahomes, that catapults them, but they did lose their best offensive player in Tyreek Hill. They have lost a couple defensive pieces as well. They replaced them with rookies. So in the kind of the same boat as we are, I mean, they have to see what they have in those guys. They drafted George Karlaftis, who's a defensive end, who has shown promise, but there's some problems in his game as well. So just on the defensive side of the ball, I feel like they actually lost more than they gained. And obviously on the offensive side of the ball, they lost their best playmaker. So to me, I feel like we're a more complete team than Kansas City. I have us as the 5th best team in the NFL behind the Bills, Buccaneers, Packers, and Chargers.
So you think right now you have them higher than the Rams? And
I have them higher than the Rams. I do.
I would switch out personally. I would switch out the Rams and the Packers. I think the Devontae Adams the loss is going to be huge for them. And the Rams, it's like I'm just one of those guys that you beat the Rams 6 regular season times in a row, but they got the last laugh, and to me that last laugh still stings. Like they're still laughing.
It hurts. Oh, absolutely.
It hurts. So I'm going to give the Rams their flowers until we get them back this year. But I think this is a pretty fair list, right? And now this is where I'm going to take this segment next. Bills, Josh Allen. Buccaneers, Tom Brady. Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes. Packers, Aaron Rodgers. Rams, Matthew Stafford. Chargers, Justin Herbert. 49ers, Trey Lance. Those 6 teams in front of the Niners have surefire quarterbacks. Trey Lance is a big question mark, and I get that's why you probably have the 49ers in this position, because if you remove the quarterback out of this equation of Super Bowl contending teams, I'm going to take this 49ers roster just about over every single one of them. I think all of their positions, they are better than everybody else. You look how deep they are in the running back room, wide receivers, tight end. The skill position players are so good. Yes, there's a lot of questions on the offensive line. That's a problem, but they are for the Buccaneers too. They're on their 3rd string center right now, right?
Exactly.
And you look around the NFL, everybody's dealing with their injuries. It's the same thing that we're used to and accustomed to. But I think pound for pound, the 49ers removing the quarterback position from the equation have the best roster in the NFL, for sure, the best defense.
Absolutely.
So this is where I'm going next. Let's talk about floors and ceilings as it relates to the 49ers and their win-loss record. Like, where do you see this team, their highest point and their lowest point with Trey Lance? Because he is the wild card. He's out of this list. He's the only question mark that's playing the most important position on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. Well, I mean, if any of you follow me on Twitter, I mean, I'm a big Lance supporter. I know there's not a large sample size, but I really believe in number 5. I believe in the guy that we drafted. I fully believe that Kyle base his decision down to who he feels like can take us over the top. And I think he believes in Trey Lance, and so do I. So if Kyle believes in Trey Lance, I believe in Trey Lance. So for me, I'll start with the ceiling. I think the ceiling is going to be 13 wins. I really think we can go 13-4 because if Lance is everything that we think he is, there's no reason why we can't win at least 12 to 13 games. You look at last year, we were 10-7, but due to the quarterback play, we actually maybe lost one or two games just because of his performance alone, right? I can think of the Tennessee game. We should have won that game. So right there, that puts us 11-6, and we wouldn't have been in the position when you're in, right? So if he can be a little bit better than Garoppolo, especially that we've improved other parts of the team, right? I mean, I feel like we're deeper at running back, like you mentioned. We're deeper. This might be the deepest wide receiver core we've had since maybe the early 90s, with Owens and Rice. In our defense, our secondary is probably the best in the league. Our linebacking core is the best in the league. And I fully believe that we have at least 8 to 10 starters on the defensive line alone. So based on our roster and based on my belief in Trey, I think our ceiling is 13 wins. Now, if he performs poorly, I still think the team will be able to carry us to the playoffs. I don't see us not making the playoffs. I don't see us have us going 8-9 or 9-8. I still think we can win 10 games. And that's because our defense is going to be so dominant. We should not be surprised if we're in the top 3 of all 3 of every single defensive category. Points allowed, passing yards allowed, rushing yards allowed, all of that stuff. First downs, because this defense is going to be dominant. Now we have to stay healthy. The last 2 years that we've gone deep in the playoffs, we've been one of the most healthy teams. That's always the biggest thing for any team. So if we could stay healthy, regardless of the quarterback play or how the offense looks, I think our defense, I truly believe this could be a historic defense. Maybe like top 10, 12 all-time defenses. So that's how much I believe in the roster on the defensive side that John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have put together. And I believe in D'Amico Ryans because we cycled through so many corners. I mean, we had Drake Kirkpatrick starting games. We had Josh Norman starting most of the season. We had Fred Warner out for a few games. We didn't have Azeez Al-Shaair. We didn't have Greenlaw for basically the entire season. We lost Verrett the first game for the entire season.
Yep.
And we were still a top 5 defense. So I believe in that unit. And I really believe that they could potentially only be giving up 16, maybe even like 14 to 16 points a game. And if the offense can't score more than that on average, then we're going to be in trouble. But I believe in the offense. I believe in Trey. I believe in Kyle's scheme. And I think we could win at least 12 to 13 games this year.
I'm with you. I think I have the same ceiling as you. I think the ceiling is about 13 wins. That's where I'd have them if they're playing at their absolute best. And absolutely, that Trey Lance from the jump is better than Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Like if we, even on Jimmy Garoppolo's best day, if we could say he's a middle of the road quarterback, if Trey Lance can be that middle of the road quarterback and slightly better, in that like 12 to 16 range, I think this can be a 13-win football team, just because we've seen what kind of goes the other way with Jimmy Garoppolo. But this is where I disagree. I think the floor with Trey Lance is a 9-8. I don't think they're going to go below 500, even if Trey Lance isn't performing that well. I think 9-8 is the floor and possibly missing the playoffs. And I don't know if this is a hot take or not. I feel comfortable saying, though, that the floor with Jimmy Garoppolo, if he were to be the starter this year, is higher than the floor with Trey Lance. And I'm going to get into that in this next topic, and I'll start this one off.
Okay.
So this is our next topic here that we're going to get into is how much confidence do you have in Trey Lance and how do you see the offense panning out this year? I'm confident. I feel good about Trey Lance. He's given me, in the fan base, everyone really, enough reasons why to feel good about him. We've seen him connect on the long passes. We've seen him be able to escape the pocket. And I love that play. It was very small sample size. But last week against the Packers in the preseason game where he's looking to run, he's still keeping his eyes downfield. Like, I love that from him. There's so many qualities to like about Trey Lance, not just on the field, but I love his leadership. I know you're a huge fan of his leadership. I love the way he presents it. I love the way he presents himself to the media. I love the way he talks after the games. He just seems like such an intelligent young man, and I have the utmost confidence in him. But as far as this immediate season goes, I can really see this being more of a boom or bust offense that we haven't seen in the past. I still think they'll get their points on the board. There's not going to be a problem there. They're not going to score, but I can see the offense being a lot more choppy and a less efficient. Because the one thing that Garoppolo didn't get enough credit for, in my opinion, was keeping the offense on schedule. picking up 6 yards on first down, even if it's a slight little dump off, hitting the receiver in stride just to pick up those few extra yards and keeping them going forward. That's the area of concern that I have with Lance, that it's really going to be a erratic offense, just kind of up and down. Chunk plays that are great. They're going to be explosive. They're going to be fun to watch. But then, here's that 1st and 10 miss where you throw it out of bounds, and now you're behind the chain, 2nd and 10. You're having a hard time picking up that first down. So I honestly wouldn't be surprised if this first year with Trey Lance, if the 49ers had more 3 and outs in comparison to when they had with Jimmy Garoppolo, but there'd be a lot more explosive plays. And I think that's a pretty fair trade-off to expect. But that's how you win football games, though, right? You control the time of possession. We know Kyle Shanahan wants to pound the rock. And if the 49ers are able to do that, they're going to be that double-digit win football team that both of us see them being. But when we talk about the floor, I really think that the 49ers if Garoppolo were to start this year, I think they're a lock for the playoffs. And I have this slight doubt in my mind, just that the fear of the unknown, right? It's natural. It's human nature. Fear of the unknown. I know what Garoppolo can do, and it's not always pretty, but he's proven that he can get the job done well enough, even if it's not always pretty, to get the victory. And say what you want about QB wins, he contributes in a way that still is positive. Not all the time, but at the end result, right? So with Trey Lance, my concern is the unknown. How is he going to look? I still think the very worst this team can do is 9-8, but that doesn't lead you to the playoffs. But as long as you have reasons to feel good about Trey Lance, I'll be happy with that. But you got to make the playoffs this year.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I agree. I mean, I think you made a lot of great points. I think there are some parts about Garoppolo's game that do kind of get scrutinized that maybe is overblown a little bit. He was pretty efficient. He did move the chains. And he was able to hit, Debo in stride on a slant, hit Kittle over the middle. And so there are some things that he did do that I will give him credit for. But the reason why I'm so excited about Trey Lance is if you go back to last year and you watch some of his play, the first game against the Cardinals, right? Kind of rocky, but then you kind of realize the situation he had. He didn't really know that he was starting until basically the day before, right? And the entire time, Garoppolo is taking all the reps with the ones up until that point, right? So he's just getting used to it. The offensive line is getting used to him. He didn't have, I believe, George Kittle that game. I can remember specifically on the first play of the game, Mike McGlinchey misses a block, and Trey scrambles up the right sideline for about 12 yards. So right there, that's just a positive. Now, he did throw an interception in that first game, and I'm glad that you mentioned him scrambling against the Packers, because this is why I'm so happy that Trey Lance is our quarterback and so high on him, is because you look at that game last year. Remember, he scrambled up into the pocket. He had about 15 yards to run and had Dwelly right in front of him, but he chose to throw to Benjamin and threw an interception against the Cardinals. You remember that?
Yep.
That's not going to happen this year. So basically, he's learned in the amount of growth that he can take a look at film and say, you know what, I'm not going to make that mistake again. And that's the thing that my big gripe with Garoppolo is we often saw him make the same mistakes multiple times a game. But in Trey Lance's case, he throws that interception early, right? What does he do? He doesn't turn the ball over the rest of the game, and was helping us stay competitive. A lot of people don't know this, but he actually had 83% of the offense in that game. So if Garoppolo was maybe in there, he maybe gets sacked 8 or 9 times and we score 3 instead of 10. At least the game was competitive. So what I love about Trey is that he may not be as efficient throwing the ball, but even though he might not be getting the 5-6 yards in the passing game, he could do it running. So let's say Burford, who's a rookie, misses a block. He could scramble for 4 or 5 yards and we see him slide, right? So that's the thing I love about him, is just his ability to learn and to learn quickly. And I'm glad, again, that you mentioned the Packers, because like you said, he stepped up, he set his feet, he was looking to see if the throw was there, and he took off and ran. Last year, he might have tried to force a throw, right? And so that's the thing that I really love about him, is his growth and maturity and understanding that I can't make the same mistake twice, because if I do, Kyle's going to be chewing me out, right? So that's the thing I love about him. Also, just his competitiveness. The guy wants to win. I really believe that he is he might feel the pressure this year, but I really feel like he thinks he can help this team win a Super Bowl. And so basically, again, just knowing how much he's grown over the last year. I mean, you could see it in even the short stint that he was against the Packers and in the joint practices, how much he's grown. I mean, he's fitting tight throws over the middle and between multiple defenders against the Vikings, and they were playing their ones, right? So I've seen enough evidence to where I feel like he can do it. Last year against the Texans, that was a must-win game. The first half wasn't pretty, but he scored, I believe, if there wasn't a holding penalty on Ayuk, that would have been a 27-point second half. So to me, some of the offense, like you said, might be a little rocky, but there might be halves where we score 30 because it's just explosive after explosive after explosive play. And so that's kind of how I see the offense going this year. Is like you mentioned, we've got a legitimate 4-3 guy in Danny Gray that I think is going to see a lot of playing time. We have Deebo Samuel coming back on his extension. We have George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, who basically last year in Jimmy Garoppolo's offense isn't really that effective. Now we're going to be able to see outside the number throws. We're going to be able to see him take the number one corner and cook him, hopefully, and get a lot more catches this year, a lot more targets. And so there's just a big variety of the offense and the playbook that Kyle can use. We saw it even in the Packers game. He was going spread a lot more, empty backfield, 3 wide receiver sets, and still running the football. So to me, those are some things that we haven't been able to do in the past to where we can do that now. And all he has to do is he can be a game manager and more, but you can expect an explosive play once in a while, which is we couldn't really have that with Garoppolo. But if we did have an explosive play, it was in the run game.
Yeah, I think you touched on it. It's the growth. There's
Right.
there's a lot to feel good about. And you also touched on the choppiness last year. And that's something that stood out to me. And everything just felt so unnatural about last season. It really did. The whole Trey Lance experience last year felt very unnatural. Going back to week 1 against the Lions, when Jimmy Garoppolo marches the team 60 yards down the field, then Trey Lance comes in the red zone, throws a touchdown to Trent Sherfield. And then all of a sudden they completely went away from that. And he comes in the Packers game, scores a touchdown before halftime, week 3, Sunday Night Football, when they almost had a comeback. And even in that Seattle game, when he came in the second half, that's a weird position to be in. All of a sudden your starting quarterback goes down, you're thrown to the fire. The Cardinals game was a little funky. The Texans game, the first half, it did not seem like him and Shanahan were on the same page at all.
Correct.
So understandably so. You know what I mean? That it was a weird year, but I'm fired up. I feel like we drafted the right guy. And now I'm looking at this schedule going to start the year. Like, what a better way to start to get your feet under you than going up against the Bears and going up against the Seahawks. Did you watch any of that game last night? The Monday Night Football broadcast on Thursday. I was watching Twitter clips. Barstool posted something today of Justin Fields running for his life against the Seahawks pass rush. And I'm just thinking to myself, Justin Fields is going to get sacked 7 or 8 times in our game week 1. And I wouldn't be surprised if the 49ers win their first 2 games with an average point differential of 20 points. Like, they really might just blow out both those teams. And just if you just think about it, you get Trey Lance's feet underneath him a little bit. He's ready to go. You go to Denver week 3 against Russell Wilson.
Absolutely.
Sunday Night Football. Oh my gosh. It's just having this conversation is just getting me so fired up.
You know what's even funnier about that game, Nick, is obviously the Bears offensive line basically not blocking for Justin Fields. But if you watch the entire first half, Seattle did not score a single point with supposed to be their starting quarterback against the Chicago Twos.
Yeah. Oh man.
So if we don't start 2-0, I'm gonna have some serious questions.
I'm gonna be loading up on the rants if we don't start 2-0.
Absolutely.
You have to in this position where you have the first year quarterback, first year starter. Yeah. You have to take advantage of this sort of opening. I don't even care if Trey Lance throws 18 passes a game. Like, you need to get victories. You need to stack those wins early on. Doesn't have to be pretty for Trey Lance, but you absolutely need to put the team in a position to win, just like you did last year. Like, think about it. If you didn't open up against the Lions and the Eagles after what happened afterward, who knows how that season goes. So having these 2 games that you should just kind of chalk up as wins up front. Yes, it's the NFL. Yes, surprises happen, but there should be no reason not to beat these. Even if Trey Lance plays awful, you should still win. You should still win both of those games.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm just going through in my head, talking about our ceilings. Do you have any games on this schedule or this year that you're just looking forward to?
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, any team against or any game against the AFC West. I mean, because you've got some surefire, like you said, surefire quarterbacks. Yeah. I mean, you've got Lance against Herbert. You got Lance against Russell Wilson. You got Lance against Mahomes. And Derek Carr now has Devontae Adams, right? So just those quarterback matchups are going to be insane. Also, Lance against Tom Brady and the Bucs is going to be a phenomenal game. And then I bought tickets. I haven't been to a game in like 8 years. So I'm going to the game in LA at SoFi. So I'm excited to see Lance against Stafford and see what he can do against Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey and those guys.
Yeah, I'm looking too right now. I personally, I'm going to make a little road trip because I don't think I'm going to be able to make it to any playoff games if we have playoff games on the road. I was lucky enough last year to go to Dallas, to go to LA. I had a blast traveling, but my work schedule is changing a little bit. I don't think I'm going to have those weekends off to go pull a trip off like that. I would love to go to Mexico City. That November 21st game against, I'm trying to line it up already. That's going to be a fun one. But you talked about Justin Herbert, that Sunday night football game at Levi's, Justin Herbert versus Trey Lance. Those can be like the future. If everything works out with Trey, my little Trey area shirt, shout out.
Warriors, look at that.
We like that. We like that stuff out here. If you get Trey Lance, who could be potentially the face of the NFL in a couple years, if the 49ers get their wish and all that draft capital they traded pans out. I love Justin Herbert. The Chargers they're not necessarily a dark horse Super Bowl contender. They're ahead of the Niners right now. I love the Chargers team. I love the makeup of that team.
Yeah, they're good.
Justin Herbert guy. Keenan Allen, one of the most underrated receivers year in and year out. He just puts up numbers. Mike Williams. We got Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa now. Derwin James just signed a contract extension. That's going to be such a fun one. The Raiders game, New Year's Day in Vegas. Sounds like trouble. Not for the Niners, but just for those in attendance. Got a bunch of drunk fans out there in Niners Raiders rivalry. Oh my goodness. Kansas City Chiefs. Like, this is a great year. What a year to go up against the AFC West. I mean, as far as entertainment goes, it might affect the win-loss column a little bit, having 4 tough opponents like that. But yeah, must-see stuff.
But like you said, like, we got to get those 2 wins under our belt, right? Because
for sure.
Because I feel like every season it's different, but teams have got to be, forecasting how many wins do we have to get to make the playoffs, right? So last year it was 10, right? 10 wins, I believe, or the Eagles had 9. They were 9-8 and they made it in, right? So if you're thinking, okay, it's got to be the NFC is a little bit worse. So if we can get 9 to 10 wins, we're probably going to be in. If we get 11, we're definitely in, right? So if you can win those first 2 games and start 2-0, you can have a couple clunker games. You can have a trap game to where maybe you lose a game that you should have won. Maybe like I don't know what week it is exactly, but the Commanders, like we play the Commanders
Christmas Eve,
right? So that could be a game to where if we're in a good position, we might be able to lose that game and be okay. But let's say we go 1-1, that might be a must-win game down the stretch of the year. And you kind of want to have games that you want to win every game, obviously, but you want to have games to where if you don't play your best and you still lose, then you still have cushion to go into the playoffs. That's what you're looking for, right? That's what happened in 2019. We came down to the final week against Seattle, but we had like a 2 or 3 game cushion, and we lost the game against Atlanta, and all of a sudden we had a 1 game.
I was just going to go right down that route, talking about that Week 16 game.
Right.
Was it Week 16 against the Falcons? I know they added a game since the 2019 year, so I guess Week 16 back then is equivalent to Week 17 right now. But yeah. This is fun stuff. I can't even express it, like how fired up I am for all of this.
It's a great schedule to have your first years or the first year of a starter going against this gauntlet. It's gonna be awesome, man. It's gonna be must-see TV, and I think we are tied for the most primetime games or something like that as well.
Yeah, always. It's been like that for the last couple of years now under Shanahan. But, if you drop one of those first 2, especially the Seattle game, Chicago's on the at home, obviously. It's always interesting, when you have the home environment like that, it's going to be rowdy in Chicago. But the Seahawks game, that would be the equivalent of losing to Colt McCoy. Like, there's absolutely no – it might be worse. Might be worse because at least the Cardinals had a decent team. But this Seattle team is so bad.
It's really bad.
I'm staying away from Tyler Lockett in my fantasy drafts. DK Metcalf, I wouldn't touch any of those guys. I don't no interest in that. So we're excited about the regular season. Regular season's almost here. We got 2 more preseason games to get through as we wrap up our show tonight. We got the Minnesota Vikings tomorrow. Minnesota Vikings. Do you have any players that you're excited to see tomorrow?
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to go by position groups because there are multiple position groups that I can't wait to see. We can discuss a few of the players, but I can't wait to see what the running backs do. I don't think Elijah Mitchell is going to be getting any carries, but I would love to see what TDB does in his second game. I would love to see what Jordan Mason does in his second game. I believe Mason came in late in the fourth quarter, in the middle of the fourth quarter. He didn't get a ton of carries. He was kind of the guy that helped them kind of finish the game off.
He looked nice, though. He looked nice.
Oh, he looked great. Yeah, he's averaging, I think, 4 or 5 yards a carry. So, but I would love to see him kind of in the middle of the game, not have that closer role. I think that might be, if he makes the roster, what he could do, because he's a big bruiser. But I'd love to see what he does, and I want him to get more carries. I'd like to see maybe Kyle use them out of the backfield a little bit more. We didn't really see that, to see their catching ability. I know that TDP can do that. I know that Trey Sermon can do that. But I would love to see maybe some wheel routes or something, just to see how they are out of the backfield.
Yep.
I don't think that's something that we saw a lot against the Packers, because I know in the West Coast offense, having a running back that can catch is very important, right? So the running back group, I can't wait to see. I think the secondary is something that pre-show we were talking about. Diamador Lenore. I know you're a big fan of Demo. I like him too. And we were talking about how something kind of happened last year to where maybe he lost a step, or the mental side of the game got away from him. But he's a really solid physical, can put his hands on you, stop you in your tracks. If he plays physical and he's got his mental side of the game right, he could be a very dominant corner. And we saw that the first 2 weeks last year. So I want to see him get back on track. I want to see him play well and possibly get into a nice rotation, or maybe even be like a CB3 just in case somebody goes down, because I really believe in him. He was a late round pick. But again, he's just a physical guy that can play really well. Again, in the corners, I can't wait to see what Ambry Thomas does. I know there's not people that are not super high on him, but I actually think he played pretty well towards the end of the season. He had a rough NFC Championship game, but he had a stretch where he played very solid football. And that's somebody that I'm excited to see, because he's also a young player. Could be one of the guys that needs to step up potentially if Emmanuel Mosley walks after this season, right? Somebody's gonna have to fill that role. So those two guys in the secondary. Also Tariq Castro-Fields, I was big on in the draft. I actually had a mid-third round grade on him, and I believe we got him in the 6th round. So to me, that was a big steal. He's just under 6 feet, I believe. He runs a 4.3 840, so he's got a lot of speed. So those are some guys that I want to see in the secondary. And also, the last position group that I'll talk about is the offensive line, because I know, again, we talked about pre-show that they're going to need reps. They're going to need to figure out continuity. And so, you got a rookie in Burford. You got Jake Brendel, who hasn't really played a whole lot of football in the NFL, despite being in the NFL for a while. And then you have Aaron Banks, our 2nd-round pick. So between those guys, I don't think we're going to see our tackles, right? So it's going to be really on the interior to see how they can play. They actually played pretty well against the Packers. They were trying to stunt and do some things on the inside, and they were able to pick it up. So I thought they did a good job. But if they can do it consistently, that's kind of what I'm looking for. Because if we can't keep our young quarterback upright, we're going to be in trouble. So the running back group, the offensive line, and the secondary, I'm really excited to see.
Definitely. And I'm looking up here at my roster layout on this other monitor, and the offensive line, I have all these players highlighted from earlier because they're just such big question marks. Aaron Banks, Spencer Buford looks like he's going to be the real deal, though. I'm very, very excited to him.
Absolutely.
I'm excited to see him again tomorrow.
I'm really high on Jason Poe, too.
Yeah. He's moving around like crazy. Our Mercer, guy out of Mercer, undrafted free agent he can do backflips, I'm pretty sure. He's a crazy freak athlete. Going back to the running back room, though, I just saw that Trey Sermon was having a hard time getting around yesterday. And honestly, I
probably won't play.
I'm taking this another route here. I know we're supposed to be talking about players that we're excited about to see in the preseason, but I don't think this Trey Sermon thing is going to work out. I don't. I just have a gut feeling that he's going to end up being a bust. I don't know why. He didn't show me a whole lot in this last preseason game. He couldn't even get on the field last year. He was terrible in the Packers game. Remember, who was the running back that we signed ahead of that? He's the big running back. He only played. What was it? What was
Brian Robinson?
What was it? Brian Robinson? I'm gonna have to pull it up.
I don't remember his name.
They signed some.
I don't remember who it was.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna find this guy's name because they signed him, and even he was getting run over. Trey Sermon. He didn't even get a touch. Trey Sermon went 10 for 31 in that game with a touchdown, 3.1 yards per carry. Not the worst, but anywho, let's try to keep it positive here. Niner Nick out here going on.
No negativity. We can get pretty animated.
I'm excited to see Brock Purdy again. I think there's something there, even if it's like in that Nick Mullins, I'm going to step in when I need to and kind of keep the team alive kind of role, because that's important. That's something that's important. And if you think back to the 2020 year the last time we saw Nick Mullins, he was miserable against the Eagles Sunday Night Football, right? He was terrible that night. But he played some good football. And I think that Brock Purdy's just little Nick Mullins but with more moxie and swagger and confidence. I like Brock Purdy, so I'm excited to see him again. A whole half of football likely. Going through this list, Danny Gray looks good. Diomedor Lenoir, he stole my thunder. I love that guy. I love Diomedor Lenoir. Let me ask you this, though. Do you think there's any circumstance where Ambry Thomas does not make the football team?
It's possible. I mean,
you think so?
The cornerback room is so deep. But what I think they love is his speed. He's a 4.3 guy. He's not the biggest guy, but he does have really good coverage ability. Again, I think he's just got to clean up the mental side of the game a little bit. He kind of blew some coverages last year in the postseason, which is, you can't really have that. But he's got the athletic ability, kind of like with Ahkello Witherspoon. Remember, he had all the athleticism in the world, but there was just something about him where the mental side of the game, where maybe, his confidence was up and down, because to play corner, you got to be the most confident person in the world, right? I mean, there's nobody more confident than an NFL corner. So if he can get that confidence up, if he can string a few games together, if he does make the team, I think he could potentially be even maybe a fringe starter next year, again, depending on what Emmanuel Moseley does. I know they love his athleticism. He's fast, and he's got good coverage ability, and he fits the scheme. So the thing is, he's going to have to show up in the preseason. If not, I don't think he's going to make the team, because remember, we have Verrett coming back. Like I mentioned, we have Castro Fields, who's pretty good. We have Diomedor Lenoir. I mean, so we're so deep at corner that he's going to really have to compete. And I love that you mentioned Brock Purdy, because one of the things that I didn't watch a whole lot of Iowa State football. I didn't know really anything about him, but I love his competitiveness. He's not the biggest guy in the world. He's not the fastest guy. Doesn't have the biggest arm, but dang, that guy loves to compete. And you can tell he loves football. I believe he was at least a 3 or 4 year starter at Iowa State. And so he's got a lot of starts under his belt. He knows how to play football. And you're right. I mean, the schematic side, the mental side of the game could really help out Trey. So it's really going to be interesting to see where Kyle goes, if he wants Nate Sudfeld to be the backup and hold the clipboard on Sundays, or if he wants Brock Purdy. I'm kind of leaning towards Purdy as well.
Yeah, that'd be crazy. They paid Sudfeld so much money. I don't get why. I don't know why they gave him so much money. I'm looking. There's another name that's kind of been being mentioned and tossed around lately. Quantrez Knight, defensive back out of UCLA, that's been making some plays, and they need on the back end, especially in that safety room. That area has been lacking ball hawks and turnover esque safeties since Deshaun Golson and Dante Whitner left. Just lighting pulls up, forcing fumbles, picking off balls. Jimmy Ward did a good job of that. He had a little better year. He had that one ball in the NFC Championship game tipped up to him from K'Wan Williams. He picked off Matthew Stafford 3 times last year. 3 times. Tarvarius Moore gave up a touchdown last week, but was playing a little out of position. He was lined up against the wide receiver, just playing him straight up in that cover 0. So I'm excited. There's a lot to look forward to this year.
Womack is a stud, right?
Womack. We didn't even talk about my boy Sammy Womack.
Yeah,
right.
What
2 picks. And not only that, the way that he had his 2 picks, like the first one, how impressive was that to just keep fighting all the way through it, take the ball away from the receiver. And that second one, he was on the receiver's hip the entire time. Like that was great coverage. And that's why my biggest knock on Ambry Thomas is it seems like he has 0 ball skills. And that's the most
concern.
I hate watching corners that have 0 ball skills. Like it's frustrating. It's frustrating to watch. Like there was that one play, I want to say it was the Atlanta game when he got mossed in the end zone. And aside from
Kyle Pitts mossed him a few times.
Aside from Matthew Stafford throwing him the punt in week 18, that all he had to do was literally catch like Vernon Davis, outside of that, like his ball skills really, really, really worry me. He gets flagged a lot. Everyone gets flagged a lot when you play corner, but him especially. So we'll see. We'll see where it goes.
I think Quantrez Knight is a very interesting name, because I know they were playing him at nickel behind Womack as maybe the second guy behind Womack, because they cut Darqueze Dennard.
I saw that too. Yep.
But I think you're right. I think they are trying him out at safety too. So that would be interesting to see if he plays safety in the game, because they might have had him play safety in the joint practices against Minnesota as well. So it'll be interesting to see if he is back there, if he can play make, because that's something that we didn't have last year. Now, this secondary this year, I believe we have like 18 or 19 interceptions in this preseason already, and we only had 11 last year. So they're definitely intercepting the ball, which is awesome to see.
Yeah, I'm looking at I don't know why I said safety. I'm looking at Quantrez Knight's UCLA profile right now, and he did start at nickelback last year.
Did he start at nickel?
So it's good.
I think they've been trying him at safety, though. I think they have been playing him at safety.
And they cut Darqueze Dennard, who a lot of people considered the favorite to be the next K'Waun Williams starting in that nickelback role. So there's a lot of bodies there. You can feel good between the wide receiver room and the cornerback room. There's a lot of young, promising players, which has not been the case for a very long time. So it's exciting.
Very exciting.
Exciting for sure. Exciting for sure. All right, Kevin, we're getting ready to wrap things up here. I appreciate you being a guest. And if you guys do not follow Kevin McKelligan on Twitter, be sure to follow him. He is the Twitter space god on there 24/7 holding it down. And that is at SF9er49. Again, Kevin McKelligan, SF9er49, SF9er49. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me this evening. I appreciate it. To all the listeners in the audience, thank you for tuning in to the Faithful Fanatic Podcast.